Hey, it's Don the Auction Professor. Today I just wanted to talk about books like this. Just these specific types of books. These are actually like guides to video games, how to win them, secrets, Easter eggs, and things like that. We have kids, so my kids have had a lot of these. I even buy them used for them sometimes when I run across a bunch of them. But a lot of people don't think much of these, especially when they're vintage games or older things like that. And guides on how to do things or games in general usually sell very well for us. Now, of course, not all of them do. Smash Brothers Brawl or something like that, I always buy. I buy the game, I buy the GameCube game, PlayStation game, whatever the case may be. The books sell as well, too. But things like this sell very well. We're just going to go over the screen, though, and we're going to talk just a few minutes about these specific types of guides. A lot of people run into these, but do not think they carry much value. You can do your scanning just like you would for FBA books or something and find out pretty quickly where they rank. Most of these we sell on eBay and do better on it. They're usually spur of the moment, or a parent buys it along with a game. If you've got the game and the book, that's usually something I would list together. Not always, but that is a good thought there. But we're going to go over the screen, and I'm going to talk a little bit about these right now. Okay, so as I showed you, these are just strategy guides. Now, I know a lot of people don't like to mess with video games, and I don't really go out of my way to purchase video games. Usually have to pay more. I can get these books for relatively cheap quite often. Even my kids have them. This is where I learned about these in the first place. For the last 10 years, I've been messing with these things as a sideline. My kids even get them nowadays, and will turn around and resell them. Once you figure the game out anyway, most people don't care about the book. So this is the exact same one I just showed you. Now, this person included free shipping. The book itself is, a 5-star guide. Brady games, pretty much any of those. But I usually get about 25 or so to $30 on this, and then they pay for shipping too. This is the exact one I just showed you. So again, I get these for $1 or $2 a piece. I would rather buy these game guides all day long than mess with video games, honestly. If there's a scratch or someone, there's a lot more scamming in the games than there are in the books. And most people pass up the game books to get the games. So I usually end up being able to find these even later on sales, even the second day. Because again, a lot of people just snap up the games. That's the big money that everybody thinks, but you pay more for them. You might get a little more for them, but in the long run, I'd rather just mess with these books, as I said. So sometimes I'm lucky enough to get 40 or 50 of these at one spot, one sale. At Savers, when Savers was open, sometimes I could find 10, 15 good guidebooks, strategy guides at Savers in the same trip. Same with, I can even find these at Goodwill or Salvation Army. Any of the thrift stores sell these. And a lot of the ones on these that are worth money sometimes are the PS1 games, the PS2 games, the GameCube. All the earlier games sell, so I do still buy those. The 80s and 90s game guides even sell for some of the Ataris even occasionally. But we sell 90s Super Nintendo, NES standard games, GameCube. Any of the vintage game systems sell, any of them. Even some of the Genesis ones. I'm going to show you just an odd mix here of these books. And again, I didn't pick every specific one. These are mostly used versions that I picked. I didn't pick most of the new ones. You're going to find some that are still new, unopened from the 90s even. And it doesn't mean they're worth money. But for the most part, most guides you can get $5 or $10 for if it's a decent game. This isn't a huge category. There's a ton up, like 26 to say 30,000 at any given time. They're not all worth a ton of money, as I said, but you can pretty much guess on a lot of these. Like when you go out to buy games, for those of you who aren't into games that much, most people know that Smash Brothers Brawl is always a good game. We usually average like 50 to 80, depending on the system on that one alone, or something like Neverhood or something, a PC game that we usually average about 80 to 100 on. So, those are the games themselves, just the disc without the case, without the books or anything. Now, you get the books on some of those, like a Neverhood book is unheard of. It might go for $300-400 for, who knows. The sky's the limit on some of the books. But anyway, this is a group of Zelda, all used, vintage to some extent, on some of these. The Chrono Trigger is one of the more popular ones, and I'm going to show you that here in just a minute. 158, and probably what really sold this one is the Chrono Trigger. And again, a lot of these earlier games usually sell. Now, this is a very popular one, Earthbound. This one almost always sells for good money. quite a little while ago, I've had chances to buy stacks of these before I knew about them, before my kids were into games. And I mean stacks. I could have had a ton of these. Who knows, though? At one point they dumped the market with some of these books just because they couldn't sell them. This one's $150. Here's a used version, Legend of Zelda. I believe this is the hardbound. It has a hardbound edition. Yeah, they're hardbound editions. $150, and these do show up. There's Japanese versions of these games. Even the Japanese versions of these guides, I still will buy. I don't care if it's in English or not. You're still going to get some money out of it. Another Legend of Zelda, $135. The different edition and all, but again, hardbound. This one is. Hardbound editions on these strategy guides are almost always worth money. Another side note on this, other books, another BOLO, this is a BOLO as far as I'm concerned because we always look for these, though, are like the art books for the video games, like the artwork of, and whatever video game. Then there's a ton of these books. I always sell them. Some of them can go for, say, $80 a piece on average or more. Like the art of Red Dead Redemption or something like that. And it's just going to be like an art book on the art that was used to make the game. Now, that's BOLO number 2 here in this one here. I'm giving you that one here. That one is definitely one that I always look for. I don't find nearly as many of those as I do like Zelda or something, but these all sell. You're going to run into these pretty much anywhere you go. You probably won't find them at antique auctions or antique stores for the most part, but anywhere else. I can even pick these up at pawn shops. So, and the pawn shops don't really price these very high usually either. Some days I can walk into a store like a mom and pop and buy a box of like 40 different guides for like $10. There's gonna be a good one in there. Even at that price for the amount I got, even if they're just common ones, you could break it up into lots of 10, and get $15-20 for those if they're just common junkier ones. But I always make money on these guides. I buy pretty much every one I see as long as the price is reasonable. So anyway. That was $135, well, $136 basically. And again, I'm trying to show you mostly used ones. Battlespire, this is another one. It just depends on the game, obviously. It doesn't have to be the name brands. It doesn't have to be any specific name. And some of them are actually guides to, like even role-playing games I've got in here too. So they're not specifically all video games, but you're going to find them all mixed together. They're usually in the same section at a thrift store. They're usually in a book section in the same section. So I'll just literally dig through these too. It's just another area. There's many books that I look for, but this one specifically, because I can find this one pretty much anywhere, this category here, and it's a very good niche. Again, they're not going to sell for $500 or much more over $2, but religiously across the board, we get $20 to $50 on most average ones that are decent. And once every couple weeks or so, we'll get one worth $100 or plus. So, just keep that in mind. They do show up. And these we can sell on other sites too, like Amazon. So just keep that in mind too. Now, Prima's guides are pretty good depending on the actual game. Vintage ones are always the best. But just most of these sell in this genre. This is a PS1 game, for crying out loud. Prima usually are earlier ones, so usually I look out for those too. I look out for the oddball games. I look them all up too if I don't know. I know most of the ones I run into because we run into them quite often. So anyway, $110 for that one. Kingdom Hearts ones I usually look for across the board because usually I sell those. Kingdom Hearts is a pretty good one. This one's a hardbound edition. And as I said, always look for the hardbound. And don't pass on the soft, perfect bound ones or anything like that. But this one here, any of the hardbound, hardcover editions usually sell. Used, I'm not showing you the new ones. The new ones do go up into the hundreds. But the used ones are the ones, these are what I look for most. And my son plays some of these games, so I know them too. I've even played Fallout before, a few times with my son. So, another good one. And as I said, like the artwork of Fallout, there's a book on that too, $40-50. So this is like a double BOLO as far as I'm concerned, because you can get the guide or the artwork from the games. Kingdom Hearts has one too. I've seen it. And as I said, this one's what made that lot sell. This is $90 average on its own. Chrono Trigger, And if you don't know, you're not going to know about this one. You know, people pass up these because they're vintage. They think the games aren't much good. But, you know, pretty much most of the vintage Mario Brothers or Zelda games sell across the board. You know, I sell them all the way back. Even Game Boys and things like that, I buy the games of. And some of the Game Boy games go for, you know, 40, 50 bucks. You know, I buy collections of Mario games as well, as I said. So even like the wristwatch games from the 80s are hundreds. It used to be a lot more, but not anymore these days. But and as I said, you know, RPG games as well, too. Nintendo's Player's Guide. Any of those. Nintendo Power in general. I can walk up on a bunch of those and get some really good ones really cheap. Sometimes I can get, you know, 60, 70 issues of Nintendo Power, you know, for, you know, $10 sometimes. And on average, I'll get $10 on average for some of those right off the bat. Or more. So, and I think I got a lot in here, too, to show you. This is $90. Another Kingdom Hearts, same version, strategy guide. This one looks like it's probably just in a little better condition other than the bumps to the corners. But, you know, $90 on this one. Red Dead Redemption, you know, Game of the Year edition guide. So this is a little different than the normal ones. This is a hardbound one. Again, hardbound ones, $90, almost $90. Red Guard, another one. It just depends on the game. The vintage ones I look for more than the newer ones, honestly, unless it's a hot new one that I know I can flip real quick, or they're really cheap. As I said, I don't pay much for most things, so $1 or $2 on average. If I see some good ones that I know I can flip for 80, $150, anywhere in that range, I'm gonna spend more money on $5, $10 if I have to, maybe even 20. Usually I can talk someone down and you know, play a numbers game with them too, and you know, work my way down if I have a bunch of stuff I buy. So overall, I consider a purchase from one person, even if I'm buying 100 different things, as one group purchase, and I split the price across all of those for my cost factor into them. So if I bought 100 items for $100, you know, maybe one of them was $10 and the other ones were, you know, at different varying prices. I'm just going to say they were all $1 a piece. You know, it's a group bulk purchase when you do that way. You know, and that's part of the plus on getting big bulks. Even if you pay $1,000 for a bunch of things and you got a ton of merchandise out of it, it's still worth it. I don't worry about how much money I'm paying. I worry about how cheap I am buying those items at. So again, 87 on this one. And again, most of these people put free postage. This guy's is better up on it. He's more what I would do because I'm not going to include postage. You know, but these they're all popular. Most of these earlier ones are popular. You know, Dreamcast, you know, I always look for as well, too. I look for anything Dreamcast. If you're not up on video games at all, at least know Dreamcast and some of the other ones. Even like the Virtual Boys. Now, I've run across a box version of that one. I've had 3, 4 in 1 year before. You know, they're not very common, but Dreamcast are even harder to find. I've got a stack of Dreamcast games here now. A couple of the Japanese ones, too. So, you know, some of those games can go for a lot of money, hundreds of dollars. So, anyway. Shenmue, that's a pretty good one, though. Bloodborne, hardbound again. So, you know, I'm not going to go into a bunch of detail. You either know the games or you don't. And you don't have to know them to make money. You don't have to even buy the game. You don't even have to know what the game looks like. You're just talking about the strategy guides. Hardbound ones I center in on. I always check those. Well, I used to when Sabres was open here, but we would always go to the gaming section too and the magazine sections. I run into magazines at those kind of places too. So anyway. Let's move on here. Now this is another Nintendo, Super Nintendo Entertainment System, NES. Super Metroid. You got to know Metroid, too, if you're into the older games. I remember when it was out on, you know, NES and all those, too. So Metroid books sell just as well. This is $85. Let me see here. Again, this isn't a huge, super long one. Street Fighter, same thing. Super NES. You know, most of these are good. As I said, $85 on that one. Now here's Nintendo Power. There's 13 of them. They are getting $76 for 13 of them. So again, I get these in big, huge lots. People love these early games or game magazines. This is like a monthly magazine. You could subscribe and, you know, you get membership bonuses and things like that too. But they talked and showed and have like hacks to the games in most of these issues. I've got some here right now, actually. So they're not hard to find, but people do love them. Dark Souls. You know, Dark Souls is a very popular game. This person got lucky enough to have, or maybe he bought them new, who knows, the hardbound versions of these. So, you know, and a lot of times why I say these show up better than the games, because the kids usually kept the games or swapped the games at GameStop or something, and the books you can't quite do that with. So, you know, when a garage sale time comes around, a parent just, you know, what do you want? You don't want the books anymore. They don't have the game anymore. So the parents throw these out at a garage sale, or they'll go, you know, bulk drop them off at a thrift store or something. You can find a ton of these. You know, this is a key item. Now, I've been doing this throughout the summer on these because, you know, my pickers find these for me. So, you know, this is your call. You've probably missed most of it. I don't want to give out every secret in the world on I do right off the bat. But next year, keep this in mind. Summer at garage sales, that's where I get a lot of these, or my pickers do. I've gotten a few from some of the places I've went, but mostly I get them from pickers. But again, they're just getting them from these places because that's what they do. You know, most of the pickers I have are flea market people too. So, you know, $75 for these 3. And they might have done a little better selling them separately. Donkey Kong Country, you know, I've played. This is another vintage SNES Super Nintendo. These sell fairly well. Average $25 a piece. As I said, $25-$30 are average on most of these style games. And this is, you know, these were mass produced. This is a fairly, you know, vintage game. It's got a good following though. So, you know, I know the game market because I've got kids. So when I've played the games, I used to play Atari back in, you know, 82 or so when I first got an Atari. Underworld, you know, this is for the PC version. Again, it's an earlier one. You know, but this stuff all sells. And again, this is an oddball named company this book's through. So, you know, just keep that in mind. $70 on that one. Chrono Trigger again, $70. They might have got more for it. I believe this was a buy it now. Some of these too, you're going to find out that, you know, maybe kids are listing them and they don't want to hold off for, you know, higher money. So some of the prices you see on these are buy it nows for a lot cheaper than you could actually sell them for. And that's part of, you've got to understand that when you're looking up comps. And a lot of people don't get that. They look at the comps and assume that's what they should get for it. That's what they should put on it. That's what they're going to price it at. That's not always the case. The majority of people, and sometimes, are selling stuff, you know, based on what other people sold it at. That doesn't mean you can't get more for it. Maybe if it's a flooded market, yeah, but if it's a scarce book like this that there might be 3 or 4 up at any given time and only a handful of comps, you can set a higher price because, you know, when you're looking at comps, they're for 3 months. So if there's 5 up, there may have only been 1 for an entire month up. So if a person's looking right this minute, they're looking and they're not going to see any others up and only see a handful up, you know, and they might not know, or you might not think that it's for a 30-day, you know, or for a 90-day period. So take that in consideration on pricing. Don't always price what the other ones sold for on some of these things. I believe, yeah, this one sold straight out $68. Uncharted, it's another popular game. I've seen it. My son plays this one too. You know, he's got a PS4, but he still plays PS3 games. Another vintage one, Brady Games. Now, most of these, as I said, there's a lot of good ones here. Castlevania, this is an old one. This is kind of like the Doom and all the other earlier ones too. So, anyway, this is a good one too. $68. Legend of Zelda. Now, this is an original one, Nintendo Player's Guide. These usually are pretty good. Super Nintendo. And it's got the foldouts in it too, which are usually good, which are basically a map of, you know, where you got to go. It shows you the whole layout of it, so you're not just looking at the small spot of it that you're walking through. So that way you can kind of judge where you're at. $65.99. You know, and again, this isn't a huge area, so it's not something. When you see them, look them up until you know them. You're going to run into the same ones over and over again. You know, and there's a lot of people that don't mess with these. I've even walked into a used bookstore and bought a ton of these before. Now, I was shocked that a used bookstore would not look up all this kind of stuff. But you'll be surprised. They'll look up a bunch of stuff and get tired of looking them up, and from that point on just assume that they're not worth a lot of money overall. Or, you know, only mess with the higher priced new ones that come in, you know, and price all the other ones, just blow them out. So, you know, it just depends. You know, I'm surprised that there isn't any bookstore that doesn't sell online as well and wouldn't know that these are worth money. But believe it or not, I found them. So, you know, and not just once, several times. So, you know, it's a routine for some of the bookstores. You usually want to go to the small mom pa ones that, you know, aren't, you know, national for sure, and that, you know, are small, like in an old house or something, or just some little downtown strip, you know, nothing fancy. Those are the ones I would go to. Another earlier one too, Jurassic Park. Now, this is Warpath. Game wasn't super popular from what I saw, and I've seen it played before, so, you know, I know it, but $65. And I just got one more here, but again, I just picked some random ones. So, you know, you spend some time looking, you're going to find some good books like this. You know, this is a BOLO all day long. I don't care what game system it's for. This is Nintendo 64, PS1, PS2, PS3, PS4, you know, Xbox, any of those, even books for, you know, Virtual Boy, Game Boy, you know, even some of the Atari, as I said, or VIC-20, Commodore 64, Odyssey games, even those I've sold. Gemini, even those books I've sold. So, I don't care what game system it's from. You just have to pay some attention to this. And again, this all works because you have to know a ton of BOLOs. You can't just have a list of half a dozen niches and you're going to make it on that. Unless you're like, the whiz on it and you have no bottlenecks and no issues with sourcing whatsoever. Now, those are the people that would be living in a California huge town or New York or something. Places like that, you probably, the sky's the limit on sourcing on some items. But, in most, 90 some odd percent of the population is not going to have that choice. So this works when you know hundreds, at least have a basic knowledge on a ton of different categories. Know that this type of book is worth something, or miniature books, which I've talked about too, are worth something, or that cookbooks are worth something specifically. Because some of the stuff that I buy, you're never going to find barcodes on. So don't ever worry about that either. Abe's Books and some of these other sites are very good sources for looking up, vintage books in general. There's a ton of them. I've got a huge, favorites section on Chrome of just, and I've got them all broken down by category. So, I know where to look for certain things and how to price things very specifically. Just because it's not on eBay, certain items, doesn't mean there's not a price available. Now, postcards, I know there's another postcard site that has over 1 million active postcards for sale at any given time. That's a different market. It's only postcards. You can't judge the same way you could on that site versus eBay. eBay has a more broader appeal for people. It's easier to handle, easier to use. And the prices overall do seem to sell better on eBay than they do on, the postcard sites. I've had people tell me use that site to price. I don't really use that site to price. And that's the perfect example. It's for postcard specific, by postcard specific sellers. So those would be the kind of people that would probably go to a postcard show. Nothing wrong with a postcard show, but if you want to make money, I don't go to postcard shows. So anyway, maybe that's your only source to find some, but your margins are going to be a lot worse than you would anywhere else. It may be your only source, so, more power to you, but for us, I've got other sources, so I avoid specific shows. I avoid record shows, and, I don't go to most of the higher-end antique stores or antique shows, or even some of the high-powered military shows. I do go to the smaller military shows and some of the gun shows just for the military collectibles. So anyway, last one, Rocket. Now, there's a bunch of these too. So this is another Prima's guide, Nintendo 64. Most people make fun of the Nintendo 64 and say, they don't mess with some of the earlier games. They know the new ones, and that's what they play with. So that's what they want, fine. But a lot of the earlier games, I find the books readily for these kind of things. And again, $65. I could show you thousands of guides that sold for more than $30 that you could average find for, even at Savers, $2.99 or less. So you can turn $2.99 into, $50 on any given day of the week if you pay attention. And again, don't just worry about the video games. Don't just worry about one category, this category, that category. If you're only going into a store and looking for like a handful of things, like let's say it's Savers. Savers has hundreds of different categoried items that you could find and sell from there. Whether you're looking in the like on the wall in one of the bags for the business section, and there's vintage calculators in some of those bags. Or there's a crafter's bags with, stamps, like, ink stampers that you can find. That some of those ink stampers I've sold for $20, $30, $40. And that's another example. Or there'll be pet supplies, and there'll be something in there that's really a good item that's not even technically a pet supply. Or there'll be Christmas hanging on the wall. Or any of these. There's just so many different niche categories. I don't no way know them all, so I'm not trying to say that, I've got this corner on every niche there is, but I've got hundreds of niches and specific BOLO items that we look for. Just from sheer, seeing them from all these years and looking into them. I've said this before, every time we get a chance, I look up something new and look into it. You know, Christmas-wise, I've spent more time, as I've said before, because that's what it is. But these games are going to be a decent push for Christmas. They will sell a little higher this time of year because people do collect vintage games for, you know, just in general. But, you know, you're going to run into brand new books like this. They're still worth money. Don't be hooked on, though, on just buying something because it's new or sealed, because there's a ton of these guides for some games that are just flops that no one wants the book. So even at $1 or $2, the books still aren't worth getting at that price. They're surely not an FBA item, you know, and most of these vintage ones I wouldn't do FBA on, truthfully. They'd be a quicker turn for me anyway, just throwing them up on eBay. I wouldn't have to worry about shipping. I could have some of these gone the day I get them. You know, if you get 100 or so guides, you're lucky enough to, you know, go up to a place and be able to source these, or a pawn shop or something just gets them in. You're good friends with somebody, or whatever the case may be. You might get them, you know, take a scan off the barcode and list them from there if you want to do, you know, Amazon straight shoot from you, or you can do it that way on eBay too. So anyway, that's what I have for you today, though. It's a real good BOLO, second BOLO again, art books on the game. So the art of Rocket, the art of Legends of Zelda, whatever the book is. Hardbound ones are always what I want to get, but I'll take the softbound ones as well, because like this one here, Rocket, it's a softbound book. So look them up yourself. You know, Saying a Crazy Field, this is something you are going to see. I bet you someone who's watching this has passed right by these thinking they're old games. Who's going to want them? You know, so anyway, that's what I have for you. Well, there you go. That's another item that you can look for. It's a pretty big, broad area. There's a lot of these books available. Some brands sell better than others. And this would be more for the folks that don't have kids and don't realize how popular some of these games are. I know a lot of people sell the games. Personally, I would rather sell the books than the games. The pay, you know, the amount of people that pay in advance and take care of it right away is usually pretty good on stuff like the books versus the games. So, and the books sometimes are a little less pricey to buy too. So I just keep that in mind here. Usually I can get a book for, let's say, $1 or so, and then the game, you know, you might spend $5 or $10 on. So, you know, the profit margin, the game might sell for 45, so you make 35. The book you get for $1, you might make 40 bucks on, you know. So I just keep that in mind when I'm buying things. What's the cheapest, easiest, less hassle item of that to buy and sell? So that's what I have for you today. Hopefully that gave you some ideas and some thoughts. If you liked the video, please hit the like button down below. You can also hit the bell icon to be notified when we post new content or go live. Subscribe and tell a friend.